William said
Ah,
it's true.
like that'll be all. Okay.
He and I talked, I guess it was a couple of years ago, and I mentioned to him that I was always interested in Bobby Charles and interested in some of the things that he did. And then from there, William said, well, why don't you come in and play a few songs, maybe talk a little bit about him. And so I did that. Since then, I've done it 9 times, and I've done it at museums in Maurice and in Kaplan, a couple of times in Abbeville, Rain, and nobody has more fun doing this than me. I have to tell you, because I love history, I love music, and I love people from Louisiana. And when you have someone who is special, as Bobby Charles was, it's, I think, very important to remember him. And, you know, it's not like he was recording this music and performing 10 years ago. This goes back a long ways further than that, to the 50s. And so that's special. And what I found when I started talking to people about Bobby Charles and doing a little background and a little research is that a lot of people knew his music from that era, the era when he recorded his big hit, and then when he was recording all the songs for Fats Domino. But there was some other music that he did, and it was part, I think, of a very interesting history that I found that a lot of folks didn't know. There's a lot of people that know an awful lot more about Bobby Charles than I'll ever hope to know. But it's been pleasant for me to be able to do this. And people ask me, how did you ever get started on this? And I love to tell them, I went to Mount Carmel in Abbeville with Bobby Charles. And that's the truth. But I don't tell everybody that he was in the 12th grade and I was in the 3rd grade. But that goes all the way back to the early 1950s, and I was only able to live in Lafayette for 1 year, but it was a great year. And fortunately, I had an older brother that knew what was going on with music, and he is the fellow that was telling me about Bobby Charles. I was too young. I was only about 8 or 9 years old, but I remember him telling me about it and always stayed in my mind. So I said, if I ever get back to Louisiana, I'm going to find out more about him. And so that's what I've been doing, and I've really enjoyed doing it, because I found out so many things about him that I thought was so interesting, and what he was thought of outside of the realm of Abbeville or Vermilion Parish or even Louisiana, because his reputation, once I started to dig into it, I found some things that was awfully interesting. One of them, which was an article with a magazine called Downbeat. Downbeat's a big musical magazine. And it said, Bobby Charles, Abbeville, Louisiana, one of America's greatest songwriters. Well, I knew he was good, but I didn't realize that to many people throughout the United States, he had reached that level. And in addition to that, the people that he knew and became friends with, which I'll go into more detail, I think that says something in itself. But if we're going to talk about Bobby Charles, then we got to talk about some of the things that led up to when he wrote that first song. Bobby Charles was a young teenager that was part of a band called the Cardinals. And they played what was beginning to be rhythm and blues, but they played country music, they played Cajun music. And in fact, what happened one day, Bobby Charles was at his house, and he was listening to the radio, which his mother and daddy had on, a Cajun French-speaking radio station. and he turned the dial a little bit, and he happened to listen to a young guy from New Orleans, Louisiana, by the name of Fats Antoine Domino. And that changed his whole concept about music. He fell in love with his style, and he made up his mind then that he was going to write a song for Fats Domino. And so he's trying to come up with a concept, and one evening the concept came to him because he and his band had played at the Airport Club or some club in Asheville, and afterwards they're at the Midway Cafe. And Bobby Charles gets up and he walks out, but he points to one of the members of his band and he said, "See you later, alligator." And some young gal seated in another booth said, "After a while, crocodile," and that caught him. He said, "Who said that? Who said that?" She raised her hand, and he said, "Wow." Got in his car, went home, and in 15 minutes wrote the epic song, "See You Later, Alligator." Well, "See You Later, Alligator," when it was written in 1954, 1955, something called rock and roll was getting ready to explode. And there was a group called Bill Haley and the Comets. Bill Haley and the Comets had done the music background for a movie called Blackboard Jungle. And in it was a song called "Rock Around the Clock." And that set the tone for that kind of music. But so did "See You Later, Alligator," because Bobby Charles recorded it, but a month later it was recorded by these people, and it went all the way to the top. And, well, let's just go ahead and do it, huh? Well, I saw my baby walking with another man today. I saw my baby walking with another man today. When I asked her what's the matter, this is what I heard her say. "See you later, alligator, after a while, crocodile. See you later, alligator, after a while, crocodile. Don't you know you're in my way now? Can't you see you cramp my style?" Well, I thought of what she told me, and I almost lost my head. I thought of what she told me, and I almost lost my head. But the next time that I saw her, reminded her of what she said. "See you later, alligator, after a while, crocodile. See you later, alligator, after a while, crocodile." She said, "I'm sorry, pretty daddy, but you know my love is true. I'm sorry, pretty daddy, you know my love for you is true. Won't you please forgive me and tell me that you love me too?" He said, "Listen, pretty baby, listen what I say. Listen, pretty baby, I love you anyway. See you later, alligator." My version is not quite what Bobby Charles did. He had a band behind him, you know, but y'all are going to have to use your imagination today, you know? You know what I mean? Anyway, so what happens is this song starts catching people's attention. And there was a disc jockey from Lake Charles. And he heard the song, and he had a connection with a group in Chicago that had a record label called Chess. And they were the Chess Brothers. Well, you know, in the 60s, in the 50s and the 60s, that's when rhythm and blues started to really move, and it moved from places like Detroit and Chicago. There was a group that played black rhythm and blues, Motown. Y'all are familiar with Motown. I know that used to be the big record company at that time, but there was a group that was ahead of them, and that was the Chess Brothers. And the Chess Brothers, they were doing music by people like Etta James, Chuck Berry, so they were really on top of the game in the early 50s. Well, this disc jockey from Lake Charles, he calls him and he says, listen, I got this guy down here, he recorded this song, and I think you should listen to it. They said, well, put him on the phone. So he put him on the phone and he said, why don't you sing that song to us? And he sang it to them, and man, they liked it. They liked it. They said, hey, we want to sign this guy. So over the phone, they go ahead and make arrangements and sign Bobby Charles up to their label. Now, Bobby Charles wasn't 25, 30, 35 years old. He was 16 years old. So here he is, totally unaware of how the music business really works. Unfortunately, he found that out the hard way. But he's so thrilled to be someone that these people have selected, and he goes along with it. He signs a contract. They send him a ticket and put him on an airplane and fly him to Chicago. And when he gets there, they said, look for someone with a sign that says Bobby Charles. That's going to be one of the Chess Brothers. So they said, okay. So he gets to Chicago, and he starts looking around in the big lobby, and he's trying to find somebody with his name written on a placard. And he sees him, and he walks up to him, and he says, hey, he says, I'm Bobby Charles. And the guy says, you can't be Bobby Charles. And he said, well, what do you mean by that? He said, I am Bobby Charles. Oh,
my goodness.
He said, my brother is going to have a fit. That's not actually the words that he used.
But it sounds like it.
He said, well, Bobby Charles said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, my brother thinks you're black. And he says, well, I'm not. I don't know what I can do about it. He said, well, come on, we're going to figure this out. So they get their heads together, and Chess Records is getting ready to go on this big tour with all these great black blues, rhythm and blues groups with one white guy, Bobby Charles. Well, you know, in those days, hotels would not allow, white hotels would not allow blacks. But black hotels wouldn't allow whites either. So they said, well, how are we going to get Bobby on this tour into these hotels? And one of the musicians said, I know how we're going to do it. He goes outside the bus, comes back in, he's got a big duffel bag. And he holds the duffel bag up, and he said, Bobby, jump in this duffel bag. And Bobby said, what? He said, jump in the duffel bag. He jumped in the duffel bag, he zipped it up. The guy picks him up and throws him over the shoulder, and he turns around and said, that's how we're going to get him into these hotels. Well, anyway, Bobby Charles toured with that group, which was an unbelievably, let's say, fascinating aspect of the music business that he had no clue. So here he was, and he was one of the featured performers. So he becomes so knowledgeable of so many things that he had no earthly idea. The time that he spent there in Chicago and touring the United States was an epic book of knowledge for him. And it encouraged him also to get serious, more serious about the business. And so he did. He wrote music for Chess, and then after about a year or so, came back to Louisiana. And when he came back to Louisiana, lo and behold, Fats Domino is playing in Abbeville again. And this time Bobby Charles goes into the club, and Fats Domino's assistants know that he's there. They go after him, and invite him into Fats's dressing room. Because Fats knew who he was now. And he walked in, and Fats looked at him and he said, "Bobby, I sure wish I'd have done that song about that alligator." But he told him when he offered it to him, he said, "I ain't singing no song about no alligator." So he had to change his mind. But he did tell him something that was important. He said, "Why don't you come to New Orleans? Come with me. Come stay with me. We can write music. I like the style." And that's when Bobby Charles told him, "I'm so honored that you think of me this much to invite me to come there and do this." But he said, "But to tell you the truth, I have no way to get there." He said, "I don't have a car." And of course, Fats thought about it for a little while, and he said, "Well, you know, you ought to give it some thought and figure out a way, even if you have to walk." So, what Bobby Charles did was, I'm not sure who his buddy was that was driving that night, but he got in his car after the Fats show, and on his way home, on the back of a shoebox, he wrote one of the epic songs about New Orleans. And I think most of you know exactly what that was.
Yes.
It was something called Walking to New Orleans. Walking to New Orleans, this is from a critic. He said, "It evokes the desire to come home to the Crescent City better than any other song. It's a great image of someone walking along Highway 90 from Abbeville to New Orleans." So this song was recorded by Fats, and it wound up being a monster hit. And I'm going to do it for you right now. This goes back to 1960. This time I'm walking to New Orleans. I'm walking to New Orleans. I'm gonna need 2 pair of shoes when I get through walking these blues. I'm walking to New Orleans. I got my suitcase in my hand. Ain't that a shame? I'm leaving here today. I'm going back home to stay. I'm walking to New Orleans. You used to be my honey, till you spent all my money. No use for you to cry. I'll see you by and by. I'm walking to New Orleans. I got no time for talking. Got to keep on walking. New Orleans is my home. That's the reason why I'm gone. I'm walking to New Orleans. I'm walking to New Orleans. I'm walking to New Orleans. Walking to New Orleans. Everybody remembers that song, and what's crucial about that song is that it set the tone for Bobby Charles and songwriting. And that came in the era where Bobby Charles was at his best, and that's from 1960 to 1962, as far as the music that he was able to write for people like Clarence Frogman Henry and Fats Domino and several other people. But that music was right in the heyday of Bobby Charles, where he was influencing the influencers. And along those lines, Let me get a little sip of this water. I always like to say, y'all believe me now, this is water. And it is. This next song was done in 1961. And you know, when you talk about Bobby Charles, there's a lot of people who are very, very knowledgeable about the music of today and the music of that era. And they give Bobby Charles a lot of credit for what we listen to now as we call swamp pop music. And that's big in this part of the world. It never goes away. And what's interesting about it is some of the songs that were done and recorded in late 1950s, 1960, you go to Henderson or you go to the Rock and Bowl, and you hear those songs to this day. It never gets old. And that's the reason why so many people give a lot of credit to Bobby Charles for swamp pop music. And this song is one of those songs, and I gotta tell y'all, this song was done was recorded in 1960. And I remember that. The name of the song is Before I Grow Too Old. Some of y'all remember it. When I play it, remember, you grab hold of it if I don't mess it up. But I remember when that song came out, I was 15 years old. And it went through my mind, why in the world would anybody worry about growing too old? Well, I'm almost 80 now. And now I understand that song a little bit better. But anyway, this was one of the big hits that Bobby wrote for his man, Fats Domino. I'm gonna go out dancing every night. I'm gonna see all the city lights. I'm gonna do everything that I've been told. But I got to hurry up before I grow too old. I'm gonna take a trip around the world. I'm gonna kiss all the pretty girls. I'm gonna buy everything that ain't been sold. But I got to hurry up before I grow too old. I'm gonna do a lot of things I know is wrong. I hope I'm forgiven before I'm gone. Take a lot of prayers to save my soul. But I got to hurry up before I grow too old. I wanna go out dancing every night. I wanna see all the city lights. I'm gonna do everything that I've been told. But I got to hurry up before I grow too old. I got to hurry up before I grow too old. Thank you. Most folks remember that song, and right in that same era, that's when, as I mentioned to you, that Bobby Charles was on a pretty good roll as far as music was concerned. And his reputation kept growing and growing and growing because he was kind of like some ball players. They get in a groove. Well, he was in a real good groove, and he was accepted by a hierarchy of rhythm and blues, people like Fats Domino, Clarence Henry. All of those people recognized that Bobby Charles had a gift. And what was interesting about Bobby Charles, as far as that gift was concerned, he was unlike any songwriter that a lot of these people had ever seen, because most songwriters, when they come into the studio, they've got everything charted out. And not only that, but they generally are capable of playing the piano to their music or the guitar. Bobby Charles never played an instrument. Never played an instrument. Never came into a studio with the song laid out. He had it all here. It was in his mind, in his head, and that's where he kept everything. And the way that he was influenced by music or a song is when something came to him. And there's a story that one time he was taking a shower in his home, and all of a sudden he starts screaming and screaming, and his wife runs in there to find out what's wrong with him. And he said, "Get me a pencil, get me a pencil." And he had come up with a song, and he needed to put it down right away. Well, one of the greatest inventions that Bobby Charles ever recognized, Bobby Charles was not a tech man. He was not a computer man. But he found out that when he got a telephone, that if he wasn't home, that he could call that phone and the phone would record. So when songs came to his head, he would call his home and sing the song to the recording. Then he would take the recording and bring it to musicians that would adapt it. And that's how they did a lot of their recordings. Isn't that something?
Yes,
Huh?
that's incredible.
I love that. Because my technology is about as poor as Bobby Charles was. But I admire him for not letting that stop him. That was not going to stop him. He continued to write in the same era of the 60s that I had mentioned to you. And if you get a chance, this next song, this was done by the Boogie Kings, it was done by so many of Warren Storm, all of those guys. It was a song called "It Keeps Raining." And this was another Fats Domino song. But if you get a chance, do yourself a favor and go to YouTube and pull up Fats Domino, Austin City Limits, It's Raining. And watch it, and if you want to see old-time New Orleans rhythm and blues at its best, that's what you got to watch, because the camera starts off where Fats Domino, as usual, he turns to the camera and he says, "Now I'm going to do something called It's Raining." That's what he said. Well, the camera's right on him, and then the camera starts to back away, and you start seeing horns. There's saxophones, 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 saxophones. He had to have 3 buses just for his horn group. But do yourself a favor and go check that out, because this song was a huge hit for him. And the way they do it, particularly with all those horns, it's awfully, awfully nice. I'm going to try to do a little bit of it for you now. It keeps raining and raining, tears from my eyes, since you've been gone, all I do is cry. Somebody help me, somebody help me. Oh, can't you see that my baby done left me? She left me reeling and rocking, walking the floor, said she couldn't stay with me anymore. It keeps raining and raining, tears from my eyes, since you've been gone, all I do is cry, all I do is cry, all I do is cry. It's raining. Thank y'all. I'm not like Bobby Charles. I can't keep a lot of this in my head. I got these notes I got to look at. I used to have a great memory. You know that, Richard? You remember that? Yeah, I don't. Anyway. Well, how we doing? Y'all remember some of these?
All of them.
That's the reason why we do it, you know, because great music always comes back. It's music, it's in cycles. And I used to do a lot of entertaining for my folks who were in assisted living homes and nursing homes, and that's how I got started doing some of this. And I would always tell them that when you wake up in the morning, if you don't have a song on your mind, think of one, because music makes the world go round. And it's important that you have something that you can hold on to, and that's why music is so important and so popular. When I started doing these deals at assisted living homes, it was always fun because the folks, you never knew what was going to happen. You know, I mean, some of these folks had some unique ideas about what needed to take place. At one time, I was doing this at my dad's. Some of you I know have heard this before, but I'm going to tell it again. I was finishing up some music, and I put my microphones and a couple other things together, and I noticed this lady. She had a walker, and she was moving towards me, and I was thinking, she's going to come tell me how good I sound. And then I kept looking at her, and I realized she had, you remember the little plastic coin purses? You squeezed them, and the coins, you could reach in and get the coins. I saw that in her hand. I said, my God, she's going to try to tip me. I got to figure out a way to change it. I don't want to embarrass myself, or I don't want to embarrass her. When she got close to me, I leaned over, and I smiled, and I said, yes. And she said, hey, go get me a Pepsi. Y'all ever hear of the air of that balloon went that way? That's a true story.
It's a grounding effect, you call it.
Anyway.
Yeah, there you go, back to
Anyway. Okay, now we're going to move on a little bit because, let's see here. This is always the part where I want it to go smooth, and it never does. Y'all bear with me here just a minute. Okay. All right, now we're going to move on timing-wise. There was a period in there where there's years where Bobby Charles almost disappeared. But from 1965 to 1972, he actually did. He didn't do any music. And he ran into some problems, which a lot of people have in the music business, because the music business can be ruthless. And unless you have someone that knows what they're doing to take care of your contracts, these guys get robbed blind, and Bobby Charles is one of them. Many, many instances where he recorded and didn't have the rights for the song that he wrote. He would turn it over to somebody in the studio just to record. And so it's fortunate that he wound up with an attorney, a friend of his by the name of Charles Saunier. And Charles Saunier helped him towards the very end of his career. And it's too bad he didn't help him earlier on, or Bobby didn't seek him out, because a lot of the contracts with the major recording studios and the major labels, they stole these guys blind. And Bobby Charles, a lot of that happened to him. And that's why later on he became so bitter about the music industry. But his music was very interesting in that some of the music that you listen to today, it was actually written in the late 50s or 1960. And this next song is one of them. This song is called The Jealous Kind. And this was originally created for Clarence Frogman Henry. Y'all remember Clarence Frogman Henry? I ain't got no home, I'm a lonely boy.
Plays music.
In 1955, Clarence Henry did that, but he hadn't had a hit, and so they were really trying to promote him, and they did The Jealous Kind for him, which I'm going to do for you. But it didn't do anything. It didn't take off, and so it was shelved. Nobody touched it. Nobody touched it until some 14 years later. An English rock and roll fella put it on his album. His name was Joe Cocker. And Joe Cocker did this song, and once Joe Cocker did this song, then people started picking it up, and it became very, very popular. But it hit its heyday in 1977 when the great Ray Charles decided he wanted to hand-pick composers, and he did it. And he did this particular album, and this song is on that album. What's interesting, though, is Ray Charles picked the composers, and the composers that he picked were songs written by the world's greatest songwriters, like George and Ira Gershwin, Rodgers and Hammerstein, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and a guy from Abbeville, Louisiana named Bobby Charles. Wow. And the name of that song was The Jealous Kind. Ray Charles said it was one of his favorite songs to sing because he could feel the emotion coming from the audience, because he said everybody has been jealous of someone at some point in time. And everybody has had someone that was also jealous of them. And that stayed with him, and so he did this song. Don't be angry if I seem rude each time we meet. Someone that you once knew, that you said used to be so close to you. It's just that I'm so afraid someone might steal you away and I lose my mind. I can't help myself the way I feel sometimes. Yes, you're the jealous kind. Was alright when I first met you, girl, I didn't mind. Now things have changed, I'm not the same, oh, and now I find I want you all to myself, don't want to share you, know, with nobody else. You must forgive me for the way I act sometimes. Yes, I'm the jealous kind. If you only knew how much it hurts to hear you say how you can't forget that before we met, those were your good old days. Why must you hurt me so? I can't stand it no more. And girl, I'm really trying. I can't help myself the way I act sometimes. Guess I'm the jealous kind. Guess I'm the jealous kind. That's a pretty good change from "See You Later, Alligator." Huh? Yes. Bobby Charles had a lot of feeling when he did music, and he said, if you're trying to write something and you don't have that feeling in your heart, then you're wasting. Put the pencil down, walk away, because it's got to come from here. And his music did that. Now, when I said that he ran into some tough times, he ran into some interesting people, but he had reached a point where he knew he had to be on his toes. So he wrote this next song, and it's a question, and it says, why are people like that? They take your love and your money, your sugar and your honey, take your skinny out there. Why people act like that? Take your house and your home, flesh from your bones, your shirt off your back. Why people act like that? Take your phone and your clock, everything you got, laugh behind your back. Why people act like that? Take your love and your money, your sugar and your honey, take your skinny out back. Why people act like that? Why people act like that? Why people act like that? That's a good question. I don't know why people act like that,
Out of that.
but they do. Okay. When I talk about the success that he had in New Orleans, you remember I referred to those years, 60, 61, 62, in that time frame. And besides Fats Domino, one of the people that he wrote a lot of music for was Clarence Frogman Henry, and I mentioned him already. His hit Lonely Boy in 1955. But there was another song that Bobby Charles did for him, and this song, Bobby Charles did well with this song, money-wise. By the way, Bobby Charles still has income coming from his music. And that goes into the Bobby Charles Foundation. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on. But one of the songs that he wrote that he did very well with was a song that Frogman Henry recorded, and the name of it is I Don't Know Why I Love You, But I Do. And that's a popular one because it took off and it just stayed right at the top. And so he did very well with it. But the song's big claim as far as the financial aspect and the income that came was some 30 years later when it was listed on the soundtrack of an Academy Award blockbuster movie, Forrest Gump. It was part of the playlist, and if you ever look at the playlist of the songs that were in that movie, they're the greatest. They're right up there at the top. You couldn't have selected any finer songs. And Bobby Charles' song is one of those songs. So, look how organized David is. Sorry about that, I had to do that.
That's fine.
I don't know why I love you, but I do. I don't know why I cry so, but I do. I only know I'm lonely, and that I want you only. I don't know why I love you, but I do. I can't sleep nights, I'm so restless. I don't know what to do, I feel so helpless. And since you've been away, I cry both night and day. I don't know why I love you, but I do. My days are so lonely, my nights are so blue. I don't know how I manage, but I do. Each night I sit alone and tell myself I will fall in love with someone else. I guess I'm wasting time, but I've got to clear my mind. I don't know why I love you, but I do. I don't know why I love you, but I do. That's one of those songs that just stays with you. And
Excuse me, sir, was Bobby Charles still living when the movie Forrest Gump came out?
yes,
Great.
oh yeah. Bobby Charles passed away 12 years ago. And Forrest Gump, you remember that was
Yeah,
a little bit earlier on.
right.
Yeah. But I know that he was so proud of the fact that that song was in there. And he was proud every time he went to the bank too.
Yeah.
That's so.
He's
Yeah.
proud of you.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm going to say this right now because I want to make sure that it is noted. During this process of trying to find out more about Bobby Charles, I got to meet some very interesting people, one of which is Mr. Charles Saunier. Mr. Saunier, as many of you know, is an attorney in Abbeville, but he was a childhood friend of Bobby Charles. That's the reason why he wound up being his estate manager and the trustee of the Bobby Charles Foundation. The Bobby Charles Foundation has contributed to the scholarship, music scholarship program at UL in excess, pretty close to $500,000. And that goes to the students in need. So some folks think of Bobby Charles as they knew towards the end that Bobby Charles was within himself. He didn't care to meet people, and they make the mistake of thinking that he was one without income. That wasn't the case at all. He just didn't care very much for people towards the end. But that did change right at the very, very end. But anyway. Now, okay, ma'am, you
Did
know,
he marry and have children?
ma'am,
Did he get married and have children?
I think Bobby Charles was married twice, and he did have children. He had some boys. I don't know very much about their background. I don't think the family was very, very close because he traveled. He sent money to Mr. Saunier and asked him to manage it for his family, and that's how he did that. Because when it's going to be a part that I'm going to get into here, but he left South Louisiana. The first time was when he went to Chicago and recorded with the Chess Brothers. But the second time is when he went to Nashville. And when he went to Nashville, some people say, people that know a lot about music, that he could have been an incredible country songwriter. And he did write some songs. And I'm gonna get to them. But before I get to those songs, I'm gonna do something, I really want to make sure that Roddy Romero, some of you know, has got his own group here in town. He did a Grammy-nominated album, and on that album was several of Bobby Charles' songs, one of which is this next one that I'm going to do, and the name of it is I Hope. It's a very simple song, but it's the kind of music that when he put something into it, it caught a lot of people, and he knew how to work the feelings. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do a little bit of this one. This is called I Hope, and as I said, this was nominated with the album that was done by Roddy Romero. Sometime, somewhere, we're gonna meet up, I know, and I won't love you anymore, I hope. Somewhere, sometime, you're gonna need me like I'm needing you right now, I hope. People dancing and let the music play. Tonight's my night and I wanna dance the night away. 'Cause tomorrow you'll be gone. So long, goodbye. I know that I'm gonna cry, but I'll forget you by and by, I hope, I hope, I hope. That's not a complicated song, but it's a pretty piece, and that's how he would manage things. Phraseology, and I talked to some of the musicians that would record with him, and they all said the same thing about how unique his style was, and that's why he liked to record with people that he knew, because they knew what he was going to do. They knew the direction he was going to go in with his song, and it's not like he was recording with people. He was recording with some very, very interesting and powerful people like Willie Nelson, Bob Dylan, Dr. John, the band, Chris Christopherson. He had so many people that thought highly of him and recorded his music. And now let me make sure that I don't miss any. Keith Whitley. I'm not talking about people that just recorded his music. I'm talking about people who he was friends with. And several of these folks came into Abbeville and nobody knew it. Bob Dylan, Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson. They were very close to Bobby Charles. There was something about him, his songwriting, in addition to that, the type of person that he was, that they appreciated. And they thought the world of him. So when you talk about some of the people that he was working with and recording with, it's awfully interesting because they not only were recording his music, but they wanted to be around him because they were friends. And I think that says an awful, awful lot for him. I'm going to do this next song. This is an interesting piece because this is a country crossover. This had to do when he was in Nashville. He wrote this song for his good friend Chris Christopherson. Not too many people write songs for Chris Christopherson.
Yeah, he's right.
Chris Christopherson wrote songs for everybody else. But both he and Bobby Charles were in Nashville at the same time, and times weren't good, things weren't going the right way for him. So Bobby Charles wrote this song, and this song it's been recorded by Keith Whitley, Chris Christopherson, Rita Coolidge. But the three ladies that have made this song more popular than anybody are Lori Morgan, Pam Tillis, and Alison Krauss. Now, I mention them at the same time because they traveled as a performing trio. And one of the songs that they loved to do was Bobby Charles' song called Tennessee Blues that he wrote for Chris Christopherson. So, you know, when you talk about Lori Morgan, Pam Tillis, and Alison Krauss, that's pretty good company. They got 37 Grammys between them. And they thought Bobby Charles' song was so special. So I'm going to try to do a little bit of it for you. It's called Tennessee Blues. And in this song, you can see in his mind that he's still carrying some burdens from way back. But, well, like I said, he did this for both Christopherson and himself. If I had my way, I'd leave here today. I'd move in a hurry and find me a place where I could stay and not have to worry. A place I'd feel loose, a place I could lose these Tennessee blues. I'd find me a spot on some mountain top with no one around me. Valleys and streams, birds in the trees, lakes that surround me. A place I'd feel loose, place I could lose these Tennessee blues. A place to forget all my regrets and keep just the good times. Some place I could sleep with nothing but peace, feel free at all times. A place I'd feel loose, place I could lose these Tennessee blues. Some place I could lose these Tennessee blues. You can see why some people said that would tell Bobby Charles that he needed to write country music. That wound up being a big, big hit. Still is. It's looked at as something very special. They call it a crossover. Okay. When Bobby Charles left Nashville, he wound up in New York. And he wound up not in the big city in New York, but he wound up in an area where a lot of musicians congregated. And he wound up sharing a house with a group called The Band. The Band was renowned and world famous at that time, but even got bigger than that. They started off as Bob Dylan's band, but they fell in love with Bobby Charles, so they were able to help him do some recording. And one of the finest albums the critics say that he ever did was one that was done with them, and it's The Last Train to Memphis. And I'll touch on that a little later on, but when he was there, in that environment, he met a man, his name was Albert Grossman. And Albert Grossman was a very, very powerful musical figure. He was managers at different times of Bob Dylan, Peter, Paul and Mary, the band, Simon and Garfunkel. So that tells you how well tied this Albert Grossman was. Well, Bobby never said that he wrote this next song about Albert Grossman, but I believe he did. When you listen to the lyrics, see if you think he didn't sing them. He's got all the money. He's got all the money. He's got all the money. He won't give me none. He's got all the whiskey. He's got all the whiskey. He's got all the whiskey. And he won't give me none. I always say, you know, that's a pretty powerful man. He's got all the women. He's got all the women. He's got all the women. He won't give me one. He won't give me one. Whenever I play that song, I just imagine Bobby Charles writing that song, but he's in South Louisiana. And he runs into Lawrence Menard, who was the founder of the Best Stop. And the lyrics would go something like this. He's got all the boudin. He's got all the boudin. But I think Lawrence would give him some. I don't believe Mr. Grossman would ever change anything. That's just the way that he was. Okay, this next little piece, the name of it is Small Town Talk. And people said, Bobby, is that about Abbeville? He said, no, not necessarily. It's just about small towns. So this is what he wrote. Now, what's interesting about this is when I said that he was in the state of New York and had made some arrangements with, on the recording side, with the band. There's a guy named Rick Danko who's in the Music Hall of Fame, great songwriter and musician. He co-wrote this song with Bobby Charles. But only 2 months ago did Rick Danko's estate turn all the proceeds over to Bobby Charles' estate. And they had been working on that for a long time because Danko said that's what he would do, but he didn't do it when he was alive. Fortunately, it wound up being in the hands now of the estate. So some funding from this over a period of time goes to them as well. So, and I'll play it and see what I'm talking about when he said, not just Abbeville, a lot of small towns. It's all small town talk. You know how people are. Can't stand to see someone doing what they want to do, and it's small town talk. Tell a lot of lies, make some people crazy, never realize they're sinking. We're all the same people, trying to live together, and we're trying to make something work. Who are we to judge one another? That could cause a lot of hurt. can't believe everything you hear and only half of what you see. If you're gonna believe in anyone, whoa, you gotta believe in me. And it's small town talk, well-known fact. Don't even know how one might react to what you're thinking. Small town talk, small town talk.
That's so true.
How we doing, William?
Doing good. Doing good, doing great.
Okay. You know, I have you told me the longer version, well, this version goes for 4 hours. I ain't got 4 hours in me. But I hope y'all are doing okay and you're enjoying what we're doing here, because I like doing this for you folks, I really do. Now, along the way, Bobby Charles met a lot of interesting people, and one of which was Elvis.
Oh, my.
And he met Elvis in Elvis's dressing room when Elvis was playing the Paramount Theater in New York. And he never, to my knowledge, because I've tried to find out everything that I could about him, and he didn't open up about a lot of things, some things. And his meeting with Elvis was one of them. But he did say that Elvis told him that fame, they were talking about entertainment and the business, and he said that fame is a double-edged sword. Because we all work for it and crave it, but sometimes when you get it, you find out that it's not what you thought it would be, and it becomes more of a burden. Because he explained that I can't go across the street to get a hamburger. And so he mentioned that to Bobby Charles. And Bobby Charles told him, he said, well, I don't know if I'll ever get as big as you as far as your music is concerned, but what's interesting is some of the same problems and issues in personal life, they both had some similar problems. But anyway, Elvis sat down with him and they had that conversation, and Bobby Charles he was proud of that. Supposedly telephone calls would be made in later dates between those two, talking about life and a lot of different things. But what he did was he wrote this song on that album, The Last Train to Memphis, and the name of this song is The Last Train to Memphis. It's dedicated to Elvis. All aboard! Take the last train to Memphis. Take the last train to Memphis. Better get on board. You want to see where the king used to be. Now he's in the house of the Lord. Last song will always belong to a church near the steeple. The king is gone, but he still lives on in the heart of the people. Take the last train to Memphis. Ought to get on board. Here's something new that you never knew deep down inside. Believe me when I say you're walking with me. Here's a feel-good ride. You can bet you'll never forget for the rest of your life. Take the last train to Memphis. Tennessee go. The king is gone, but he still lives on. The house of the people. House of the people. House of the people. Last train to Memphis. Okay, all right. Well, listen, I've got one more Bobby Charles song, and this song is appropriate because this song is the name of the documentary that is about ready to have its worldwide presentation. That's going to be in Abbeville. And the exact date of that, I'm going to let William know. It's going to be at one of the theaters, and they're doing some adaptation to make sure that that the film itself will be there. I was very fortunate because Mr. Saunier showed this to me right before I went to Kaplan and did this in the Kaplan Museum. And if you get a chance, make sure you don't miss that, because it's very, very special, and it's very, very well done. Very, very well done. And the name of it is I'm in a Good Place Now.
Excuse me, how will we know when this documentary will be there in Abbeville? How will we know? Will it be?
Well, the only one thing I can tell you is that I don't know, but the man has got a means of being able to get it out to the public. And whenever I find out about it, I'm going to let William know, and then he can send out
Great,
a notice for you all.
great.
I will tell you that this thing has really been something that's been a work of love for Mr. Saunier, because this has been going on now for some 8 years. And you know what the holdup is? The same people that made it difficult for Bobby Charles to make a living and to recoup monies that he himself should have been receiving. Those are the same people that's making this drag out. They're wanting an enormous amount of money, claiming the rights to different songs. So that's what's going on. That's what's taking place. And anyway, I know it frustrates Mr. Saunier, because he's dedicated his life to making sure that that's done. Anyway, this is the last song that Bobby Charles, one of the last songs that he did, and this is the title of the documentary. Wild apple trees blooming all around, I must be in a good place now. Sunshine coming through a rainbow-colored sky paints pretty pictures in my mind. Oh, what a good day to go fishing, catch the sunset on the hill, dream of yesterday and tomorrow, and hope that you'll be with me still. Saw a butterfly and I named it after you. Love is all around and all I see is you. I must be in a good place now. I must be in a good place now. Pretty song, isn't it? Okay. All right, well,
You said that was one of the last ones. When was that?
yeah.
When was that? What year was that? His last one?
I would say probably about 73.
That long ago?
Yeah. He had more recordings that were done at a later date, and a lot of that's still in the hands of his family, it hadn't gotten published. But he did a lot of recording at Dockside Studios because, you know, I'm sure you all have heard the story about the bad luck that he had, where he lost a home on the river that burnt down. Then he lost where he resided at Halley Beach with the hurricane. So he had no place. And Dockside helped him. Dockside Studio, I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, but Dockside Studio is right on the Vermilion River. And you can get to it by going to Milton or Maurice. And that's where it's an incredible recording studio, and Bobby Charles wound up doing a lot of recordings later on towards the end of his career. And that's where Dr. John and a lot of those guys all congregated. So that's what's going on with him right now. One of the things that I did see finally in Abbeville is on the outskirts, they've got that memorial to Bobby Charles. And it says, Bobby Charles, or it says Abbeville, Louisiana, home of legendary songwriter Bobby Charles. And I thought that was awfully nice. But I will tell you this, when I did the tribute in Kaplan, Mr. Saunier was kind enough to let me take a lot of the exhibits, and that was photographs of Bobby Charles at the Get, Bobby Charles downtown, Magdalen Square, Bobby Charles Hall of Fame music, his awards, and all of that we were able to lay out. And people had never seen that, plus the fact that they didn't know of what that foundation was doing. And that foundation has done a pretty good job of helping people with musical scholarships for UL. So anyway, well listen, I hope y'all have enjoyed some of the stuff that we did with the music. I always enjoy coming over here and visiting with y'all. And I appreciate y'all letting me come over and do this one more time. Okay?
Hey, Dave, got one question.
You take any questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Earlier, when you were singing Walking to New Orleans, there was a line in there that went, "Ain't that a shame?" Didn't he also make that song later on? Because didn't, what's his name sing it? Ain't that a shame?
No, actually, that song was recorded. You're talking about Ain't That a Shame?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that was.
because that was a line in one of the songs that you sang.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut everything off, but yeah, if y'all have any questions, I'll be glad, more than glad to try to help.
Dave, excuse me.
David.
Here. Could you kind of elaborate on the story when he was in New York and they did the film with the band called With the Last Dance, or and how he got, you know, why that led to his bitterness?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. When I talked about Bobby Charles towards the latter part of his musical career, that he got frustrated, and so that encouraged him to become a loner. He didn't socialize an awful lot with people, and that did change, by the way, later on. But for a long time, he didn't want any part of really society. And that's a very good question, because when we talked about the group, the band, world renowned, and they had in around 74, I think 73, 74, they had a movie that was made called The Last Waltz. And that included people, the cream of the crop performers, along with the group, the band. They performed. Bobby Charles was invited, and he wrote a song, a special song for that. And Martin Scarisi, and I may be mispronouncing that, but he was a director. And it was either him or one of, I got two stories on that about who was it that was responsible, but they showed the movie, and the movie was a huge, huge hit, very, very popular, and everyone who participated in that movie, like Bobby Charles, were shown and had a piece of it, except for one guy, and that was Bobby Charles. And for some reason, I still don't have an answer. There's a lot of variations as to why that took place, and I'm not sure which one was. I was told by someone else that Bobby Charles wanted money for that movie, and nobody else was getting money. And so he said, well then, I don't want any part of it. That's one of the things that I heard. But the other thing that I think is more prominent is that someone took his piece out. And when that happened, it just broke him down, because he was looking forward to that, and the recognition would have been worldwide. But after that, he didn't perform. He didn't perform. Another interesting thing about him is that he did not like being the front man on a stage. In other words, the lead singer. He didn't care for that at all. He looked at himself as being the songwriter. And there were so many people that I talked to that had concerts lined up and shows featuring Bobby Charles, and he would tell them that morning, I'm going to be there, don't worry about it, I'll be there. And he never showed up. He just never showed up. Very, very interesting individual who probably, I think, is the epitome of how rough the music business can be. You better really be on your toes, because they've got experts, including chess. Because the song that I talked about, when I was saying that Bobby Charles wrote this and it wound up being such a nice moneymaker for him, the guy who is listed as co-author is the agent for Chess Records. He didn't have anything to do with it. But that's how ruthless that business can be. And unfortunately, a lot of young guys, when they feel the music, that's all they want to do. Just let me get up there, let me record. There's a lot more to it than that. And I don't think you can find a better example than Bobby Charles. But Bobby Charles' estate still has income coming from all over the world, but primarily Asia, Japan. They love his music there, and there's still a viable flow of income coming from that part of the world.
Stiff.
Wow. Where is he buried? Abbeville?
Very in Abbeville.
What was his name? What's his full name?
Bobby Charles Guidry. Bobby Charles Guidry. That's another thing that Chess did for him. They said, we can't have this Guidry, we gotta get rid of that. So they banished him from using Guidry, and that's how he became Bobby Charles.
I live in a small community of Milton, and nothing really exciting happens there. But every once in a while, I'd work at school and go to the grocery store at News after to pick up groceries. And the big thing was, Bobby Charles had come by that day for Boudin. And that's when he was working at Dockside. So it happened pretty often. That was the big buzz.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, sometimes you get an opportunity to do something, and for some reason or the other, you find something gets in the way. I had a very good friend of mine who was a very good friend of Bobby Charles, and he said, whenever you're ready, you let me know, and we'll go to Abbeville, and we'll have him come meet us at Shucks. Because at Shucks, he's got his own personal deal, and I never did it. I never did it, and that just frustrates me to no end, because I would have loved to have been able to talk to him. And I would have told him that I went to school with you.
How old was he when he died?
71.
70,
Yeah, I looked it up.
I think 72.
Oh, okay.
He was born in 1938.
Yeah, 10 years old.
Oh, okay.
He was born in
What year
1938.
did he pass away? What year he died?
12 years ago.
12 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
David, did you go to his funeral?
Ma'am?
You didn't go to his funeral?
No, I wasn't as involved as I was with this until afterwards, but I knew what was going on, and I've talked to several people about who went to the funeral, and
It was beautiful.
I should have, it's another thing I should have.
Before it started, Dr. John had a group, and they sang all his songs. I was there because of his sister and I'm friends with.
Yeah.
And they sang all these great songs in church.
Well,
You went to the funeral?
when I did this in Maurice, thanks to this guy right here, Richard, on the front row was Bobby Charles' sister, his niece, and the granddaughter of his sister. I think that's right. But I had the chance to meet with them afterwards.
She was responsible for that.
Well, you did a beautiful job. I was
worked-
thrilled.
That was his godchild.
His
His
godchild,
godchild and his sister.
sister.
And then her baby.
Well, she made me feel good. She said,
Oh, you made her feel good. She
well,
just- she-
you know,
They just were so appreciative.
yeah, that was,
Yeah.
I was thrilled to be able to do that. But anyway,
Tell us a little bit about your background.
well, I originally grew up in Houma, Louisiana, and my parents are 1,000% Vermilion Parish. My daddy's from Mo, my mother was from Abbeville, and we had 5 boys in our family, and 4 of us were born in Texas because that's where Daddy had to find work in the late 30s. And so we moved back to Louisiana, and when we were in Texas, our vacation, we couldn't wait for it because we would spend half of it in Mo and then the other half in Abbeville. And those were great times. I love Abbeville. I love the memories. I like to go there. I like the people. And so anyway, my mother was a Lede. She had 11 brothers and sisters. And my grandpa had a grocery store. I had an uncle that had a grocery store on State Street. His name was Claude Lede. And he had the IGA bakery and grocery store. And in Primo and Malibu, that was another uncle. I lived with my Uncle Walter for a year. That was the 1 year that I stayed in Abbeville and went to school because my mother didn't want us to change. So my older brother and I lived in Abbeville that 1 year. And then we moved to home from here. And I started doing some of this stuff, as I said, for my mom and daddy. And I enjoy doing this. I sing around town a little bit. I sing a couple of times a month over at a place called Whiskey and Vine. And we do Frank Sinatra, that kind of music, you know. Standards. Yes, sir.
David, I've seen this presentation. This will be my 3rd time. And I don't think it's appropriate to shut it down without singing your original composition.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, if you twist my arm.
Ah,
Okay, I wrote this song in 2014. And the reason why I wrote it, my best friend was fighting Lou Gehrig's, and he since passed away. But he couldn't move, and he could hear, and he loved music. So he told me one day, he says, listen, you need to write a song about Louisiana. And I told him, I'll write it if you help me, if you give me some verses. So he said that he would, and when I sent the song with the lyrics to Washington, to the Library of Congress, there's two people there as songwriters, John Haydell and John David Faulk. And I showed that to him, and this guy told me he was a great athlete, he pitched in the major leagues. He said, this is much more important to me than whatever I did in the major leagues. Now that was a kick to listen to him say that. So anyway, let me get my cheat sheet. And the name of it is Love Louisiana. And I had that as the name because I do. I love Louisiana. And this kind of jumps around a little bit, but it to me, I just listen to it, I guess. Cochon, Delay, Joël, Soigné, Crawfish, Étouffé, hey, 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 Pocky Wing. Tabasco, hot, 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 Lash Pa, La Patate, Bill Platt, who that say they gonna beat them Saints? Manchac, Sazerac, Dr. John's real name's Mac Revenac, Marday Garball. If you get a little tired, take you some haddock call. Say, la vie, mon ami, wanna see a real Cajun? Honey, take a look at me. Till, ado, Fontenot, the last time I saw 'em, they were walking to New Orleans with Fats down on the nose. Chevrolet, Carondelet, Grostet, never ever, never ever, never ever, ever shoot a white egret. Casinos, we take a dance. Swamp Pop, we take a chance. Evangeline, you are my sunshine. Jean Lafitte, Pistol Pete, meet you in the quarter down on Bourbon Street. Sauce, Pecan, Cousin Dudley, J.Lo Blanc. Rain has its green frog. Rodrigue went to heaven with his blue dog. Natchitoches, well, hello ya. Dolly Parton was a steel magnolia. Duck Dynasty, some people still speak honestly. Catahoula, Chatahoola, Chapatoulas, Opelousas, Chapalaya, Jambalaya, crawfish pie, filet gumbo. Louisiana, 1927. Good people got lost in that flood. They found them all. They were in heaven. I love Louisiana. Hey, if you know of somebody that might not understand some of the things that we talked about in this little tune, you tell them to come down and see us right here.